it's an interesting movie. And I think part of why it's so successful is I don't think it's necessarily just a creature feature. Like it's a psychological horror movie in a sense, right? You've got
Right.
all the tension between the characters. And then, yeah, there's some creatures in there. But I mean, maybe that's part of why people like it so much. There's so many different elements to it. It's not just like them versus the creatures. Like there's a lot more going on there.
And that's what made it a lot of fun.
So Tig, Eric, you watched The Descent.
We did. We watched The Descent thanks to you. For people who aren't aware, when we got this pick from Kenna, who's been a long time part of the club, we had a few to choose from, and I was delighted to see the Descent on the list because, as I told Tig, this has been on my list for a while. So as soon as I saw it, I was like, nope, that's definitely the one because I've wanted to see this.
Only put a couple horror movies on there. You probably would have expected more. I just didn't want to pick all of one. You know, I watch a lot of horror movies, and when you guys picked that, I was like, okay, yes, this is good. It's one of my favorite movies.
So for people who aren't aware of what The Descent is, Kenna, why don't you briefly explain this movie for people?
Yeah, so basically 6 women get together and go on an adventure. They go to explore this cave. But it's kind of like a little bit of an effort to reconnect and heal from some trauma.
Yeah, it's a pretty straightforward premise, which I think really works in its favor. Just so you're aware, Tig, we watched the European version, which has a slightly different ending than the way it ended in the US. In the American version, it ends with her on the side of the road having escaped. But in the British and European version, which is the version that we saw, of course, the implication is that no, she never actually really did escape. She kind of lost her mind down in the caves and never got out.
So the one that I've seen, which is the only one I've seen actually, is where she's in the vehicle and she turns and she sees Juno in the vehicle. Is that the one that you guys watched?
Yes.
Yeah.
Does it cut back to the her in the caves in the
No.
version that you've seen?
No.
Oh no. Okay. Now see, in the version that we watched, it cuts back and you then see her back in the caves and she could hear the creatures, you know, in the distance. And it's very, very strongly implying either that she never actually escaped and that the escape itself was all in her head.
That's interesting. I've never seen that ending. But I guess your ending, the one you saw, doesn't exactly fit with the sequel, which I haven't seen, but I know the premise of the sequel, which is that she goes back with the authorities.
That's because I saw that there was a sequel when the one that we watched. I was like, what there's like a new team of people go into the game. so
yeah,
it negates. So the one we saw doesn't fit with the sequel.
That's what I mean. That's really weird.
This is one of those movies that I walked away from enjoying it a lot. There's so much to like about this movie that really, really dug tons of it. And yet also left me disappointed because I think it fell just this short of being what it could have been. I like the fact that not only was it a group of women who were heading down the caves, but in the older days of horror, you would very much expect these would be a bunch of young college women who are like at a lake in swimsuits and
screaming all the time.
Yeah, it would be very much about that, but it wasn't. These were women who've lived some life. They were adventurers and strong and capable, which was excellent. The movie didn't have that subtext that you also often see in horror, where basically it's like the victims, women especially, are being punished for their sexuality. There was none of that. This was just, you know, here's 6 friends who have an adventurous spirit and they're going on this adventure together, and horrible stuff happens. I loved a lot of the photography, like all the cave stuff was really well done. It's very claustrophobic.
I was gonna say the cave stuff was hard to watch for me because that's one of my big phobias, and I was like, oh man, when they're getting stuck in the little crevices and the cave.
Yeah, when Sarah gets stuck.
And did you guys know that there's actually no caves in this movie? They didn't film in any caves.
Yeah, it was all on studio, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I was
yeah.
kind of wondering how much of it was built and how much of it was.
It's all built and green screen. Yeah, there's no caves, so they did a really good job, I think.
And again, Kenny, you can speak to this. Among horror fandom, it seems that Juno is now one of the most hated people in horror. Is that accurate?
Sarah, I haven't had a chance to say that I'm really sorry I didn't stay around longer after the accident.
I hope not. I actually don't hate her character at all. I think she's a great character.
I'm so glad to hear you say that. I'm with you. I'm curious to
Yeah,
hear why.
I actually really, really like her character a lot. I mean, she's a flawed character, which makes her a little bit more realistic, I think. Yeah, she's done some bad stuff, but I mean, ultimately, she's the most selfless character in this whole situation. I mean, she won't leave without Sarah. I mean, part of that is probably due to the guilt that she feels for things that she did, but I really like her. She's badass and she's super smart. That's unfortunate to hear that so many people don't like her character or hate her character.
I'm kind of with you on that.
Yeah.
People of course blame her for having an affair with Sarah's husband, as is implied in the beginning, and for just making the reckless decision of leaving the map book behind and just jumping into the this unknown cave system. But unlike a lot of people who are driven by guilt, she's taking action to make up for the things that she did. That's what this whole trip is about. It's about her trying to take ownership of what she did and try to heal the wounds that have been created between herself and Sarah in particular.
It's about us. Getting back to what we used to be. I wanted us to claim this place, name it.
I didn't think it was fair that she was kind of punished for accidentally stabbing Beth. She didn't mean to do it. I didn't understand what they expected her to do.
Yeah, I agree. And it was not just an accident, but it was an accident in the midst of them being savaged by horrific underground cannibals.
I was going to say, my son was watching with me and he was like, well, it's her fault for tapping on her shoulder during a fight. He's like, you don't just walk up like, hey, what's going on? And he's like, of course you're going to get stabbed. I'm like, exactly.
Not gonna lie, I was thinking that the first time I saw it. It was like, why would you sneak up on someone like that?
I mean, and that accidental killing, to me, I found that tragic, and not simply tragic for Beth. Obviously, it's tragic for Beth because, she's dead.
Yeah.
But it was tragic for Juno as well. She accidentally killed a friend in the midst of this horrific situation.
But here's my question, though. When they wrote the movie, though, they clearly were trying to get Juno to be what a large portion of people that watch the movie to be. She cheated with her husband. She dragged him into the place without telling them, like it was never, when she wanted to make a name for the cave by them going. She accidentally stabs the person, Beth, in the neck, and all those things were written that way so that the audience like to blame. So it's sort of understandable why some people don't, right?
Yeah,
like
I agree with that.
It was written that way.
I think it's almost, maybe it depends on your own personal experiences in life with who you relate to most here or who you feel sympathy or empathy toward, because I'm not the kind of person who thinks that you do something wrong and you're out of there. Like, so for me, I just feel like, well, God, she's human. She's trying, like Eric said, right? She's doing everything she possibly can to get back in the good books or try to make things right, even though of course it's not ever going to be right. But I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I can see that. I can see why some people would be like, oh, she's the villain. I don't think so.
They at least were trying to aim people that way.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say that she's flawed and that she made some terrible mistakes that caused people to lose their lives. But she's not a villain, and I think any viewer who sees her as a villain, she is the one who's taking charge to try and lead everyone out of there. Now, granted, she's the one who got them stuck in there as well, sort of. I mean, she didn't cause the cave-in. But I think the key thing to remember with Juno is that none of her actions were done maliciously. She made mistakes, yeah, but there's not, there was never malevolence there. And I think that's really important to recognize. She's a tragic character. I think she's just as tragic a character as Sarah is.
Yeah, I agree. I think they were just all stuck in a situation and trying to do what they could to get out.
Which then leads me into one of the things that I really liked, but then ultimately that I felt fell a little short for me, which is the movie begins, it's going to be sort of an examination of of guilt and loss and trauma. But then ultimately, I felt like in the last third of the movie, they didn't examine or resolve any of those themes, except maybe to some extent with Sarah. But even with Sarah, basically the way they kind of resolved that was to make her into bloody badass, which was cool.
Baptized
the pool of
in
blood. Yeah, like that was terrific. Visually, it was terrific. I just wish they would have like gone a little further into those into those themes. You know, you had these 6 characters, but really you have like 2 characters. The other 3 characters, I mean, of course, you know Sarah's sister, but they were kind of just blank slates to me. I don't really know who they were and why they were there. They were just sort of there to fill out the body count.
I was gonna say they were there to die.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
I kind of feel like other than Sarah and Juno, all the rest of them could have been wearing red shirts. You know, as in, you know, the Star Trek red shirt thing.
I kind of disagree. I mean, yeah, they're a little bit of a plot device, but I think of it more as you can kind of tell whose side everyone is on here, right? You can tell what this affair did to this group of friends, eager to just throw Juno under the bus, right? Oh, well,
Yeah, that's
if
true.
this happens, then Juno's gonna, well, better her than me, one of them says.
Can we talk about the monsters at some point? Because
Yes.
That's exactly what I was just going to bring up.
Yes.
all right, Ken.
What were your guys' first impressions of the creatures?
Because when you first see them, you're like, I don't understand what's happening. Like you kind
It
of
looks like Gollum or something.
Yeah,
I remember
yeah.
the first one I saw, I was like, is that Gollum? What's going on?
And when they first showed up, my initial impression was, especially because they had seen some cave paintings and that sort of thing, oh, this is a group of humans that had somehow gotten trapped or never came out of the caves and evolved that way. It's like, you know, ancient humans. Then obviously the later implication is that, no, it's something more ancient than that.
What did you think, Ken? Like, did you have like an opinion on it after you watched it?
When I first saw them, I was like, okay, bat people was my first reaction. One thing I thought was really interesting was like the only boobs we see are creature boobs.
Oh, yeah,
Yes.
that's true.
I'm glad that you brought that up because that leads into something else that I really liked about the creatures. It wasn't just like a bunch of just monsters. There were the female monsters, and I think there was even like some children or smaller ones.
Yeah, because they hear a baby crying at one point, right?
Mhm.
So there's families. It kind of gives you the impression that, okay, no, there's a whole like little grotesque monster ecosystem down here. It kind of then places it a little more in the real world. You can't think too hard about them.
It's an interesting movie, and I think part of why it's so successful is I don't think it's necessarily just a creature feature. Like it's a psychological horror movie in a sense, right? You've got
Right.
all the tension between the characters, and then yeah, there's some creatures in there, but I mean, maybe that's part of why people like it so much. There's so many different elements to it. It's not just like them versus the creatures. Like there's a lot more going on there.
And that's what made it a lot of fun. You don't expect it.
As with all these, I didn't look into it first. I knew just the very basics of the premise, and that was it. So when she first spots the one, I thought it was a person. I'm, ready for like, okay, so what's this going to be all about? How did they get down there? And, and this sort of thing. And then when they turn out to be creatures, and then you're like, oh, okay, yeah, this is a lot grosser than like people being down there. This
Totally.
maybe that's another reason why the cave is still undiscovered and not on maps, is because anyone who does go in there was a really subtle bit. They reach the chasm and they have to cross the chasm. She gets most of the way across, but then there's something already up in the rock. I like that because it speaks volumes without actually saying anything.
This equipment's at least 100 years old. No one uses stuff like this anymore.
You see that and you realize, okay, people have been down here before, and yet still nobody knows about this cave.
It was like Chester Copperpot.
Good reference. Yeah, I mean, I think I like a lot of the little subtleties like that in this movie, actually. And even the subtle ways that they mention the affair, they don't actually mention it, right? It's just implied.
Yeah.
I mean, someone could actually just watch it casually and miss that.
I thought that was a great decision in the writing. They didn't have that big confrontation.
Juno's basically the Jenny of the horror genre.
Meaning that you unfairly tarnished her.
Yeah, like I had a problem with Jenny for a long time until me and Eric had a conversation about it, and Eric convinced me that I was looking at it the wrong way. And it's the same with Juno. Like, you have to realize she's just flawed and she's not bad.
And that's
No.
actually interesting. Sorry, what because Eric, you'd mentioned before that like you really liked that these women weren't, chastised for, their sexuality and things like that. But in a way, I guess Juno is, because everyone's kind of against her because she made this mistake.
A lot of this could have been avoided if she had been able to articulate the way she felt, if she would have been able to speak up about the way she felt. And you kind of feel like that the rift in the group in general wouldn't be there if Juno was able to speak her mind. But I guess she felt she couldn't because Sarah lost her family in a tragic accident.
And yeah, I mean, that scene in the hospital where Sarah's breaking down and Beth is holding her and telling her daughter's gone and stuff. You see Juno in the background. I mean, there's so much pain on this character's face. She's feeling so much pain, but she can't bring herself to go and be the one that comforts her, which is sad.
This could have just been a romp through a cave with some creatures, but it wasn't. There's more going on under the surface. And again, the fact that it bucks horror movie trends, having not just an all-woman cast, but again, none of these women are sexualized at all, especially in the horror genre where that's so commonplace. It was kind of refreshing to not have that be part of the movie.
One thing that I thought that I would bring up that you guys probably noticed is sort of the nods to other really big popular movies. But I kind of felt like they turned Sarah into Carrie. She's covered in blood. Like Carrie essentially acts irrationally. I mean, yes, all this bad stuff happens to Carrie and you feel bad for her. But I mean, she goes a little too far in that movie. I mean, come on. And you see Sarah covered in blood with that intense rage in her eyes. And it's like, holy, it just kind of made me feel like, oh, okay, so maybe this is their way of saying, maybe Juno wasn't the villain here.
I'm actually really glad that we ended up talking about this movie, because after reading some internet reactions, to see so many people that were very much on the Juno is the villain train, I found that kind of disheartening, because I kind of felt like it was the flip of that. Juno is the tragic character, and Sarah, she might begin as the tragic character, but she's the one who takes it a little too far. But now, she snapped. She had not a reason to go too far, but you understand how she got there. But she's the one who goes too far. Juno is the tragic character. Why does, at least the section of the internet that I saw, why Juno become the villain? I'm not on board with that.
Same. What do you think, Tig?
I understand that they were trying to aim people to not like Juno. When Sarah hits her in the leg and she leaves, if everyone was supposed to be like,
I think that is so terrible if anyone actually cheered for that moment. I think it's such a tragic moment, honestly.
Like, I expected him to get back to back and maybe start fighting, and maybe die
Which
fighting back to back.
So cool.
Yeah, but instead it was sort of a little bit, I was kind of shocked when she did that to her.
Have you guys seen Apocalypse Now? Most people have
Yes,
seen
I
Apocalypse
have
Now.
not, but
Oh no, because I was gonna say,
you could say it. It's not gonna.
okay, there's a scene. So you remember the iconic final scene in Apocalypse Now where
Martin Sheen. I'm sorry. Yeah, Martin Sheen.
it's coming out of the water, right?
I've seen
So
that.
they kind of redo that scene in The Descent where she's coming out of the water.
Come on.
I want to say, Kenna, thank you for bringing this movie to my life. I'm glad that I finally saw it and had a chance to have a really good conversation about it. It's good stuff.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. I'm really excited that you guys enjoyed this one, and I'm glad you picked it.
And this is one of the rare horrors that we've done.
Well, hey, if you ever want to do horror movies, I can make some more recommendations. So
Yeah, that would be great.
one thing I wanted to show, actually, I don't know if you guys have seen like the cover and the poster.
Oh no,
It's pretty awesome.
it's a great
Isn't
design.
it great? I mean, I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, that would have been a cool
No wonder
poster.
I rented it, shopping around Blockbuster or whatever, and this stood out. I was like, ooh, what is that?
Yeah.
Like, I want to hear what everyone else has to say about this movie. Like, what do you guys think? And also, one thing I'm really curious to hear is who you think the villain is. Who's the villain in this picture?
Tig, now that you've gotten done watching The Descent, you are going to watch one of my favorite modern science fiction thrillers, the 2014 British science fiction film Ex Machina.
Hi. Do you have a name?
Ava. Caleb. You have to help me.
What's the real test? You.
It's strange to eliminate something that hates you.
Very exciting. For one, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh,
And I
thank
hope
you so much for having me. This has been a lot of fun. I was a little like, oh, I've never been on camera. This could be really weird. And I know I caught myself looking at myself a lot, which I'm going to try not to do, but it was fun.